Part 1. The house people refuse to name. The Tantrik's house, where mantras are still heard at night. There are some places that exist on maps, but not in conversations. Places people pass every day, yet pretend they have never seen. This story is about one such place, on the outskirts of a growing town, where streetlights slowly disappear and the road narrows into broken asphalt. There stands an old two-story house. No signboard, no address plate, no official name. Locals simply call it that house. If you ask someone directly, what is that place? Most will avoid eye contact. Some will change the topic. A few will quietly say one sentence before walking away. Do not go there at night. The house is surrounded by overgrown trees, their branches twisted as if frozen in pain. Even during the day, sunlight struggles to touch its walls. The paint has peeled away, revealing damp concrete stained dark by time and moisture. Windows are broken, but never completely shattered, almost as if something inside prefers them half open. According to municipal records, the house has been abandoned for over 20 years. According to the people who live nearby, it has never been empty. The first rumors, the earliest rumors, began spreading in the late 1990s. Back then, the area was mostly farmland, with only a few houses scattered around. That was when people first noticed strange things happening at night. Farmers, returning late, would hear soft chanting carried by the wind. Not loud, not aggressive, just low, rhythmic whispers. At first, they assumed it was someone praying, but prayers usually end. These sounds didn't. Night after night, the same pattern repeated, always between 12:30 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. Dogs refused to go near the house. Cows broke free from their ropes. Birds stopped nesting in the trees around it. One old farmer reportedly said, "It sounds like someone practicing something." Again and again, as if death never stopped him. That sentence would later make terrifying sense. Who lived there before it became a place of fear? The house belonged to a man whose real name is still debated. Some records list him as a spiritual healer. Others describe him as an occult practitioner. Locals used only one word: Tantrik. He arrived suddenly, bought the land in cash, and built the house in isolation. He did not attend local gatherings. He did not invite neighbors inside. But people came to him. A lot of people. At odd hours. Sick children, desperate couples, businessmen, women in black veils. Those who visited rarely spoke about what had happened inside. Those who did spoke only once. One former visitor later told a journalist, "He never asked questions. He already knew why you were there." Things that shouldn't have happened within a year of his arrival. Strange incidents increased. Animals were found dead with no visible wounds. Symbols appeared in nearby fields overnight. Children complained of nightmares involving the same house. People reported seeing lamps lit upstairs at 3 a.m. The most disturbing part? No electricity connection was ever installed. Police received multiple complaints, but every time officers approached the house during the day, they found nothing illegal. The Tantrik was calm, polite, and always cooperative. But one junior officer later admitted, "I felt like he was allowing us to leave, not letting us investigate." The disappearances. The first confirmed disappearance was a teenage boy who lived 2 streets away. He was last seen heading toward the forest path near the house. His body was never found. Then a stray dog vanished. Then 2 goats. Then another child. Fear spread quickly. Villagers organized night watches, but no one volunteered to patrol near the house. Parents locked their doors before sunset. People stopped using the road entirely after dark. And then, one night, something changed. The night the chanting became clear. Until then, the chanting was distant, unclear, like whispers lost in the wind. But one night, multiple families reported hearing distinct words, not prayers, mantrs, low, deliberate, repeated with unnatural precision. People described it as if someone was standing right outside their windows, even though the house was hundreds of meters away. One woman claimed her walls vibrated in rhythm with the sound. Another said her child began repeating the same words in his sleep, words he had never learned. That night, 3 people reportedly saw the same thing. a figure standing on the second-floor balcony of the house, completely still, facing the forest. Not moving, not breathing, just watching. The police raid under pressure. Authorities finally organized a proper investigation. A team of officers entered the house in broad daylight. Inside, they found things that were never officially documented, but leaked through personal testimonies. Burnt red cloth buried under the floor. Handwritten mantras smeared on walls using unknown substances. A locked room with symbols carved into the ground. A strong smell of incense mixed with decay. But no bodies. No weapons. No proof of crime. The Tantrik was not arrested. That night, the chanting stopped for exactly 7 days. The final night on the 8th night, neighbors reported screams coming from the house. Not one scream. Many. By the time police arrived, the house was silent. The Tantrik was gone. No signs of struggle. No farewell. No explanation. Officially, the case was closed as voluntary disappearance. Unofficially, everyone knew something was wrong, because even though the man was gone, the chanting returned. After he vanished, the house was sealed. People moved away. The land was marked unsafe. Yet every few months, reports came in. Security guards quitting after night duty, trespassers running out screaming, audio recordings capturing whispers when no one was inside. Lights appearing in the upstairs room at exactly 3:07 a.m. No one ever stayed inside past midnight. No one, except those who never came back the same. Why this story matters now for years. The house remained untouched. Until recently. Urban expansion has brought roads closer. New residents, unaware of its history, have moved nearby. Some believe the stories are exaggerated. Others think it's just another haunted house rumor. But something has changed. In the last 6 months. Chanting has been recorded on mobile phones. People have reported hearing mantras from inside their own homes. One leaked audio contains a voice whispering a sentence no one recorded consciously. I never left. This is where our investigation begins, because what happened inside that house did not end with the Tantrik's disappearance. It was only the beginning. Asterisk. Part 2. The night we entered the house for more than 20 years. No official investigation had lasted beyond sunset inside the Tantrik's house. Many had tried. None had stayed long enough to explain what truly happened after midnight. That was the reason we were there. I want to be clear about one thing before continuing this story. We did not go in looking for ghosts. We went in looking for proof, audio evidence, environmental changes, psychological effects, anything that could explain why this place continued to affect people long after the man who built it disappeared. At least. That's what we told ourselves. Preparation for the investigation. The plan was simple. We would enter the house before sunset, set up static cameras, audio recorders, and temperature sensors, and remain inside until sunrise. No provoking, no rituals, no religious items, just observation. There were 4 of us, me, documenting and narrating a deal, handling camera and lighting sound, responsible for audio and monitoring frequencies. No man, logistics and safety. We informed local authorities. They laughed, warned us, and told us not to call them after midnight. One officer said something that stayed with me. If you hear chanting, don't answer it. And whatever you do, don't repeat the words. Entering the house, we crossed the broken gate at 6:41 p.m. The moment we stepped onto the property, the air felt different. Not cold, not hot, just heavy, like breathing through damp cloth. The front door was already open. No signs of forced entry. No recent footprints. Just silence. Inside, the smell hit us immediately. Old incense, rot, and something metallic. The walls were covered in faded markings, barely visible under layers of mold and peeling paint. Adil whispered, almost instinctively, "It feels like someone was just here." We began setting up equipment. 2 static cameras on the ground floor, 1 upstairs facing the corridor, 3 audio recorders placed in separate rooms. Everything was time-stamped. Everything was working. At least. For now, the locked room on the ground floor, behind what looked like a storage area. We found the room mentioned in police leaks, the one that had been locked. Years ago, the door was still sealed with rusted chains, and yet the lock was open. Not broken, not forced, just unlocked. None of us remembered opening it. Inside the room, the temperature dropped sharply. Our sensors confirmed it. Nearly 7 degrees lower than the rest of the house. The floor was carved with deep symbol circles within squares, intersected by lines that made no sense geometrically. At the center, a dark stain had soaked into the concrete. Saad's voice shook as he said, "There's something wrong with the audio in here." His recorder was picking up a low-frequency hum too deep to be human speech, but rhythmic, almost. Deliberate, like breathing. Night falls by 9 p.m. The house was completely dark, no insects. No wind, no outside noise, just us, at first. Nothing happened. We sat, monitored screens, and documented small things. Random temperature shifts, mild dizziness, an overwhelming sense of being watched, at 11:48 p.m. One of the upstairs cameras flickered. Just once. We reviewed the footage. Nothing visible, but the audio track had changed. There was a faint whisper beneath our voices, too low to understand. We decided not to acknowledge it. That was our first mistake. 12:30 a.m. The chanting begins exactly at 12:30 a.m. Every audio recorder activated at once. The sound was unmistakable. Chanting. Not loud, not aggressive. Steady. Measured. Each syllable pronounced with unnatural clarity. It wasn't echoing through the house. It felt like it was coming from inside the walls. No man froze. Adil slowly turned his camera toward the staircase, and that's when we heard it clearly for the first time. Not just the mantra, but a voice behind it, guiding it, correcting it. Teaching. The upstairs corridor against our better judgment. We moved upstairs. The corridor was long and narrow, with doors on both sides. At the far end was the balcony, where people had once reported seeing a figure standing motionless at night. As we walked, Saad suddenly stopped. He pointed at his recorder screen. The device was detecting two overlapping audio sources. One was the chanting, the other was silence. Perfect. Unnatural silence. As if sound itself was being swallowed. Then one of the doors creaked open on its own. Slowly. Deliberately. From inside the room came a smell of burnt oil and ash. Adil whispered, "Someone's in there." The first visual anomaly. The camera captured it before our eyes did. A shadow moved across the far wall. Not fast. Not sudden. It moved like a person walking calmly, but there was no body casting it. Just a shadow. When we reviewed the footage later, we noticed something horrifying. The shadow had no head. 3:07 a.m. time. Started behaving strangely. After that. Our watches showed different times. Phones lost signal. One camera shut off completely. Then, without warning, everything stopped. The chanting ceased. The house went completely silent. And at exactly 3:07 a.m., a new sound began. Footsteps. Heavy, bare, walking slowly from room to room upstairs. Each step perfectly spaced out, like someone inspecting their property. Adil's breathing became erratic. No man whispered, "We should leave." Before anyone could respond, one of the audio recorders played something back on its own. A voice. Clear. Calm. Distorted. "You are late." The name that should not be said. Saad began trembling. He stared at the symbols on the wall, eyes unfocused. Then he spoke a word none of us recognized consciously. But the moment he said it, the chanting resumed louder, closer. Later research would reveal it was a binding syllable, used in old Tantrik rituals to anchor consciousness to a place, saying it was not an accident. Something wanted him to say it. The exit that wouldn't open. We ran for the stairs. The door at the bottom wouldn't budge. Not locked. Just UMOVABLE. The chanting surrounded us now. Not coming from one direction, coming from everywhere. Inside our heads. And then, from the locked room below us, came a sound we will never forget. A deep voice, layered beneath the mantra, whispering the same sentence again and again. "This house remembers." What we didn't know yet at that moment, none of us realized we had crossed a line. We thought we were observing, documenting, recording, but the house was doing the same to us, studying us, learning. US and one of us, though we didn't know it yet, had already been. Notice chosen because some places do not want visitors. They want replacements. Asterisk. Part 3. The diary that was never meant to be read. We did not leave the house immediately after what happened at 3:07 a.m. That decision still haunts us. The chanting slowly faded, not suddenly, but as if someone was deliberately lowering the volume. The footsteps stopped. The pressure in the air eased just enough for us to breathe normally again. And then something even stranger happened. The front door opened on its own. No creaking, no force, just opened. As if we were being allowed to leave. But by that point, curiosity had already overpowered fear, because fear warns you to escape. Curiosity convinces you that the worst has already passed. We were wrong. The room we hadn't entered before leaving. Saad insisted on checking one last room upstairs, the one that had remained locked throughout the night. The door was old. Its wood cracked and swollen from moisture. Symbols were carved into it, different from the others. These were more precise, more intentional. Unlike the rest of the house, this room felt clean. Too clean. No dust on the floor, no webs, no decay. It felt maintained. In the center of the room lay a small wooden chest. No lock, no markings. Just waiting. When Adil opened it, none of us spoke. Inside was a diary. Bound in dark leather, edges worn smooth by years of handling. The pages were yellowed, but not fragile, as if they had been preserved carefully. On the first page, written in ink that had faded to brown, were the words, "If you are reading this, then I have succeeded." The Tantrik's words. The diary was not written like a confession. It was written like a manual. The Tantrik described his work methodically, observations, results, failures, corrections. There was no guilt in his words, no fear of consequences, only purpose. He believed death was not an ending, but a transition of location. According to him, the soul did not need a body, only an anchor, and the house was that anchor. One entry stood out. The mistake others make is trying to leave their bodies. I will leave the world instead. He described a ritual meant to bind consciousness to a physical structure. Walls, floors, foundations, earth soaked with intention. The ritual required offerings, not symbolic ones, living ones. The missing animals, the disappeared children. They were not sacrifices to a deity. They were fuel. Why the chanting never stops. The diary explained the chanting. The mantra was not summoning anything. It was maintenance, like a heartbeat. As long as the mantra continued, the binding remained stable. That was why the chanting followed a strict schedule, repeated nightly, reinforced at specific hours. In 3:07 a.m. That was the exact time the ritual had been completed years ago. Every night. The house remembered. Asterisk the page that was torn out about halfway through the diary. Several pages had been violently torn away. The edges were jagged, uneven. Saad pointed it out immediately. Why would he remove these? The next intact entry answered that question. If someone reads the final words, the bond weakens. Knowledge invites interference. The missing pages likely contained the final incantation, the one that sealed everything, or worse, the one that could undo it. The name appears again near the end of the diary. One word appeared repeatedly. The same word Saad had spoken unconsciously during the investigation. The binding syllable. The Tantrik described. It is a key frequency, a sound that aligned the human mind with the house itself. He warned that hearing it too often caused changes. Heightened sensitivity to sound, loss of time awareness, emotional detachment, gradual identity erosion. Then he wrote a sentence that made our blood run cold. The house chooses those who hear it clearly. Saad had heard it clearly. The first signs we left the house just before sunrise. None of us spoke during the drive back. By the next day, things began to feel off. Saad complained of headaches and insomnia. He said he could still hear a faint humming at night. even miles away from the house. Adil noticed unexplained scratches on his arms. Perfectly straight, parallel, as if made intentionally. As for me, I began dreaming of the house. Not nightmares. Memories. Rooms I'd never entered. Walls I'd never touched, yet they felt familiar. The audio we missed 2 days later. While reviewing footage, we discovered something that none of us remembered recording. One of the static cameras had captured audio after we thought everything was shut down. At 4:12 a.m., long after we had left, a voice spoke clearly into the recorder. Not chanting. Not whispering. Speaking. They will return. The voice was not distorted. It was calm. Confident. As if stating a fact. Saad's behavior changes over the next week. Saad changed the most. He became withdrawn, quiet. He stopped responding to messages promptly. When we finally met, he looked exhausted, but not from lack of sleep, from listening. He admitted something that made the situation far more serious. I can hear it now, even when I'm awake. He said the chanting wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside his head, syncing with his breathing, and sometimes, without realizing it, he found himself whispering the words under his breath. Correctly. Perfectly. As if he had always known them. The realization, the diary had warned about this. The house did not trap people physically. It extended itself. Through them, the Tantrik didn't need to walk the world again. He needed carriers. Voices. Minds that could continue the maintenance. We had not documented a haunted house. We had stepped into a system, and it was incomplete. Because the Tantrik had disappeared before finding a permanent successor. Until now, the last entry, the final readable line in the diary, was written shakily, unlike the rest. As if the writer himself was uncertain. If the chanting ever stops, I will have to return. We looked at each other when we read that. Because for the first time since the night we entered the house, the chanting had gone silent. Part 4. When one of us was no longer himself, silence should have felt like relief. After weeks of chanting, whispers, and sleepless nights, the absence of sound should have meant safety. An ending. A release. Instead, it felt like standing in a forest where every insect suddenly stops making noise. A warning. The diary had been clear about one thing. The chanting was not a threat. It was containment. And now, it had stopped. The first night without the chanting, Saad called me at 2:46 a.m. I could tell immediately something was wrong. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't scared. He sounded calm. Too calm. It's quiet, he said. Do you hear it? I told him no, that everything was silent. There was a long pause on the line. Then he whispered, "That's the problem." Before I could ask what he meant, the call disconnected. Changes we couldn't ignore by morning. Adil and I went to Saad's apartment. The door was unlocked. Inside, the place was spotless, unnaturally so. Furniture had been rearranged. All the lights were off, yet the room felt illuminated, as if lit from within. Saad was sitting on the floor, not slouched, not relaxed, perfectly upright. His eyes were open but unfocused. When he looked at us, it felt like he was seeing through us, not at us. Adil asked softly, "Saad, are you okay?" Saad smiled. It wasn't his smile. "The sound is no longer needed," he said. "The structure is complete." My stomach dropped. Those words were not from the diary. They were new. The voice beneath his voice as Saad stood up. The temperature in the room changed. Not colder, denser. Like the air had weight. When he spoke again, his voice layered. One tone was Saad's. The other was older, slower, resonant. You read what was unfinished. Adil backed away instinctively. "Who are you talking to?" he asked. Saad turned toward him and tilted his head slightly, as if studying something unfamiliar. "You still believe I am one person," he replied. The lights flickered. No electrical fault was later found. Possession is not what movies show. There was no screaming, no violent thrashing. Possession, we learned, is quiet. Efficient. Saad began speaking in patterned sentences structured like instructions, not thoughts. He described the house in impossible detail, the depth of its foundation, the way sound traveled through its walls, the exact placement of symbols that none of us had ever seen. He described rooms that no longer existed. Then he said something that chilled us completely. I built it to survive forgetting. The return of the mantra at 3:07 a.m. Saad's breathing changed. Slow, measured, perfectly timed, without moving his lips. The chanting began, not aloud. Inside our heads. Adil covered his ears and screamed, but the sound didn't fade. It wasn't entering through hearing. It was resonating. The mantra no longer needed a house. It had found a voice. What the diary didn't tell us later, when we reviewed our notes, we realized something crucial. The diary described the ritual. The anchor, the chanting, but it never described what happened after completion, because the Tantrik had never completed it himself. He had vanished before the final transition. Until now, Saad was not being controlled. He was being inhabited. Shared. Rewritten. A DEEL, single quotes, S. Recording in a moment of desperation. Adil turned on his camera. Saad noticed immediately. He smiled again. Good, he said. Witnessing strengthens permanence. The camera captured something our eyes could not, for a single frame. Saad's reflection in the dark television screen behind him did not match his movements. The reflection stood still. Watching. The warning we ignored Saad, whatever he was now approached the door. Before leaving, he turned back to us. You believe this is possession, he said. That word comforts you. He paused. This is succession. Then he walked out. After he left, Saad disappeared that night. No messages, no calls, no sightings, but the effects remained. People across the town began reporting familiar sounds, low chanting, faint humming coming from places that had nothing to do with the house. Schools, hospitals, apartment buildings, anywhere with foundations deep enough to carry sound. The house had not been abandoned. It had been copied. The final discovery, one last thing, confirmed our worst fear. When we returned to the house days later, the symbols on the floor of the locked room were gone. Not erased. Completed. And in the center, carved freshly into the concrete, were words that had never been there before. I no longer need this place. Part 5. The house that learned to walk there. Is a mistake people make when they hear stories like this. They think the danger ends when the location is abandoned. They believe horror is tied to walls, rooms, or cursed land. That belief is why this story matters. Because the Tantrik did not bind himself to a house. He bound himself to memory. The day the house was destroyed after Saad disappeared, authorities finally acted. Too many reports had surfaced. Too many recordings. Too many identical complaints from people who had never heard of the house before. The decision was made quietly. No press, no public notice. The Tantrik's house was scheduled for demolition. We were not informed officially. We heard about it from a night guard who recognized Adil from our footage. He said something strange during the call. It doesn't feel like we're destroying it. It feels like we're late. The last visit we arrived before dawn. Heavy machinery surrounded the property. Floodlights illuminated the house completely for the first time in decades. And yet, it looked smaller. Shrunken. Like an empty shell. The symbols on the walls were still there, but faded, weak, as if their purpose had already been fulfilled elsewhere. Inside the locked room, the air felt neutral. No pressure, no weight, no presence. Only silence. For the first time since we began this investigation, the house felt truly abandoned. That should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like standing in a room after someone dangerous has left. What the machines recorded during demolition. Something unexpected happened. The operators reported interference in their headsets. At first, they assumed it was a technical issue, but when the recordings were reviewed later, they revealed something chilling. Beneath the engine noise, beneath the radio chatter, a voice could be heard. Not chanting. Speaking. You are removing the skin. The voice did not repeat. It did not need to. The destruction, the house collapsed easily. Too easily. No resistance. No structural struggle. When the final wall fell, a cloud of dust rose into the air, and for a brief moment, several workers claimed they smelled incense. Old, burnt, familiar. Then it was gone. The land was cleared, sealed, and fenced off. Officially, the case was over. Unofficially, that was when things spread. Saad was never found. Months passed. No trace of Saad was ever discovered. No bank activity. No digital footprint. No sightings confirmed. But his voice began appearing in places it shouldn't have. Adil received a voicemail from Saad's number. There was no greeting. Only breathing. Slow. Measured. Time. At 3:07 m. The new pattern reports began forming. A pattern one we recognized too late. Chanting was heard in buildings under construction. People complained of repetitive dreams involving unfamiliar rooms. Some described hearing instructions while half asleep. A few reported whispering words they did not remember. Learning always the same symptoms. Always gradual. Always beginning with silence. The Tantrik system no longer needed a fixed structure. It had evolved. The final audio, the last piece of evidence we ever received, came anonymously. An audio file. No message. No explanation. Just sound. It was recorded inside a modern apartment building, miles away from the original house. You could hear traffic outside, elevators, normal life, and beneath it all, chanting. But something had changed. There was no echo. No decay. The voice was younger. Stronger. And then, clearly, calmly, it spoke. A house is only a beginning. What this means, the Tantrik sought immortality, not through the body, not through legend. Through continuation. Through repetition. Through people who listen without understanding. The diary warned that knowledge weakens the bond, but silence strengthens it, and silence spreads faster than belief. Why we are telling this now. We debated whether to release this story, whether speaking about it would make things worse. But the truth is simple. It doesn't matter anymore. The chanting no longer needs witnesses. It needs hosts. If you have ever woken up at night feeling like a sound stopped the moment you became aware of it, if you have ever caught yourself repeating words you don't remember learning, if silence sometimes feels too organized, then you already understand. The final warning: do not seek the house. Do not search for the place.